What's it like being a coach at the University of Texas and balancing faith and family in the midst of wins, losses, and job changes? And there's an interesting story about some life-changing bacon. Coach Herb Hand, the co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at the University of Texas. That interview is coming up. What's up? Hey, it's John Finch with the Father Effect movie, which is now free to watch here on YouTube at the link in the upper right hand corner. If you're new to this channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be alerted every week when we release a new video. I got the opportunity to interview some college football coaches from all over the country, and they have some fascinating and powerful stories about how they got to where they are today. Be sure to check out the Father Effect Show at the link in the description below. Today's interview is with Coach Herb Hand, the co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach at the University of Texas. Coach Hand shares his experience of growing up in upstate New York, his grandfather's influence, his faith, how coaches impacted his own life, his coaching journey through Auburn, Clemson, Penn State, and other colleges, and ultimately to the University of Texas. If you know someone who is a big University of Texas Longhorn fan, or you think may be interested in this video, make sure you share it with them. Now, without further delay, here's my interview with Coach Herb Hand. Look at this stuff right here, Coach. What do you think?
Love it. Welcome, man.
And now you got to understand how difficult this was for me now, because, you know, I went to Baylor.
Right. Okay. You just got to, I think you guys had some other hand signal. I'm not sure how that one goes, but I know this one here for sure.
Well, you know, I told my wife, so my wife went to University of Texas, went to the graduate school and all there. I told her I was interviewing. She goes, well, you got to shave and cut your hair and get in the shower. You can't be looking like a punk interviewing my coach, man.
Well, I listened to her advice too, because I went in and shaved before we jumped on this thing. I was looking a little rough after, being holed up for a few days.
Absolutely, dude. It's been one of those just crazy times, isn't it, with the kids and just everything going on? It's a tough time for everybody, I think.
Yeah, it certainly is a challenge in a lot of regards, many regards. Fortunately for our family, for our players so far, we've been blessed and not had a lot of medical issues through this. There's just been a lot of other challenges, with the whole idea of social isolation or social distancing, I should say. And, I like the idea of saying that we should have physical distancing, but really we shouldn't have any social distancing. We should still be socializing with one another. That's why it's great to get on this talk with you today, get a little, even though we're not sitting in the same room, we are getting a little FaceTime with each other,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's dive into your story, Coach. Just kind of give me the background on like where you were born, where you grew up, that type of thing.
All right. So I was born in Southington, Connecticut. Really only lived there for a very short period of time, for about 6 months. And then grew up, spent the first 10 years of my life in northern Maine, basically on the Canadian border. We grew up basically in potato farming country. My grandfather was a big potato farmer in the area, and we lived out on the back farm. And at that time in northern Maine, they didn't even play football because that was during harvest season, and the schools would be out, basically from September to mid-October, for harvest and for that 6-week period. And so there was no football. My parents got divorced when I was 2. My mom got remarried when I was 10, and my stepdad was in the Air Force. He was stationed at Loring Air Force Base at the time, and then he got transferred to Griffiths Air Force Base in upstate New York. So we moved there when I was 10, grew up. Really spent the rest of my, formative years in upstate New York with my mom, my stepdad, my brother John, my older brother John. I have 2 younger sisters, Becky and Stephanie, and so We also have a half sister who lives in Canada, Dawn, from my dad's second marriage. So, we're typical family nowadays. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And you know what? And actually, too, and I've talked to many guys and just a few in the last couple of weeks, and just really the valuable part of having two dads, and what they're able to teach you and pour into you as fathers. What were some of the best things you learned from your father, your fathers? Obviously, you grew up probably with a very much a work ethic because of potato farming and things of that nature. But what did they teach you?
Yeah, the watching my grandfather really work on the potato farm, and I was really close with my grandfather. And, I used to ride around on the tractors with him out in the fields. That kind of really, gave you an idea about what type of hard work, was in farming when you're out there. I just remember when I was a kid, we would work picking rocks in the field to get the rocks out of the field so we could plant the potatoes. And so you'd pick rocks first. There was a process to the whole growing of potatoes and whatnot. But I'd ride around on the tractor with my grandfather, and so that kind of gives you the idea about work ethic and what it takes to be in the farming industry, I guess, but agricultural world. My dad, from the time that as early as I can remember until right around the time when my mom got remarried, my dad lived about two towns over, and so we would spend some weekends with him, and that that was different. It wasn't. It was hard, to be honest with you. I mean, it was hard, when you have divorced parents, but our mom was awesome. I mean, she held everything down. She very modest family. My mom worked at a bowling alley as a cook, and that's where she met my stepdad. And he was in the Air Force, and when they got married, that was a big thing, in our lives, quite obviously. And then there was a time period in there, as a like I said, in formative years, when you got your stepdad and you got your dad. And I look back on some of the things that I may have said to my stepdad that I really regret, like, "No, don't tell me to do that, you're not my father," things like that I think about now, and how hurtful that probably was. And we've gone, we're past all that, which is good. I mean,
Yeah.
we've kind of rectified that whole thing between us. But I think I really had a real great appreciation for my stepdad when I went to college. When I got out of high school, and him being in the military, he was disciplinarian, and so I learned discipline from him. Um, you know, so we sorted a bunch of things out. And when I went to college, I really started getting a greater appreciation for, like you were saying, having two dads. My dad and I, my biological father, my dad and I have a really great relationship. We're probably more like buddies. We have that kind of vibe going, and that's cool. And then my stepdad and I have a great relationship as well. So I always say I was blessed with two dads. So, a lot of, like I said, it's almost a typical American family, it seems like. But,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
You know what? And dude, just growing up with in that environment and just understanding it's funny, especially as guys, you know, we think we know it all until we get to be about 2021. Then we look back and go, man, our old man kind of, they knew what they were talking
yeah,
about.
no doubt. No doubt. Yeah.
So, dude, let's get into the story about how you came to God's country, which is Texas. Piece together kind of the college history, how you got into college football or got into football, I guess, in general, and then how you made it to Texas.
Well, I started playing football, probably I think around the fifth or sixth grade, somewhere around there. I was always a bigger kid, and I really gravitated towards football. And then also at that time, with the relationship that I had going on with my dad, with my stepdad, I really gravitated to coaches, just as really as a father figure as well. I had a lot of great coaches in high school, in Pop Warner Junior High, and then particularly in high school, my high school football coaches. And those guys, Jerry Carigliano and Pat Pasalacqua, those guys are my high school coaches. And, they really had a huge influence and impact on my life, and really were the kind of the inspiration, if you will, to want to get into coaching. And then when I went to college, I had, there's three of my coaches in college. Steve Frank was a head coach at Hamilton College at the time. Paul Adey was our D-line coach at first, and then he was the offensive line coach where I played offensive line. He was the offensive line coach for my senior year. And then guy that I got unbelievable respect for, that I really, want to honor every day with the way I coach football, is Mike Davis. Was my offensive line coach at Hamilton College. And those guys really, took the foundation that my high school coaches had laid in me and really built on that. And, for me to be able to make a profession out of what those guys did, it's just my way of giving back to the game, but it's also my way of honoring those coaches that invested so much in me as I was coming up through. So, I started out coaching small college football in West Virginia. First stop was at West Virginia Wesleyan College. It's where I met my wife, and we can talk more about that. Obviously, I think we will, but just been kind of building a career since then. And that was back in 1991. It was my first year at West Virginia Wesleyan, and went to a couple of small colleges, Glenville State College at the time. Rich Rodriguez, who was the head coach at West Virginia for many years, and at Michigan and at Arizona. He was the head coach at Glenville State at that time. So I was on assistant coach with Rich. Went to a little small school called Concord College in southern West Virginia. And that was a really impactful stop from a personal standpoint. I got baptized there in the Princeton Church of God by the father of one of my guys that I recruited to play for us at Glenville State. He was a pastor in the area, and we went to church there at Princeton Church of God, and just had an unbelievable experience from a personal standpoint while I was coaching football at Concord. Went from there to Clemson University when Tommy Bowden was first at the head coach at Clemson. I was at Clemson for 2 years. Then Rich Rodriguez got the head job at West Virginia. So I went to West Virginia University, was there for 6 years. And then from there went to University of Tulsa out in Oklahoma. Todd Graham was the head coach there. That's where I first worked with a guy named Gus Malzahn, who now Gus and I were co-offensive coordinators at Tulsa together. And I went to Vanderbilt. Spent a great, had a great run at Vanderbilt, 4 years there with some really, really good dudes, good players, good coaches. We had a great team pastor there, Lance Brown, who had a big impact on all of us. Went from there to Penn State. Was at Penn State for a couple of years when James Franklin was the head coach at Vanderbilt, and he went to Penn State. I went to Penn State with him. 2 years at Penn State, then joined up with Gus Malzahn at Auburn for 2 years, and then got the phone call from Coach Herman, and just really, God put us here. Really felt that this is a place that we needed to be. It was tough to leave Auburn because I have 2 kids. 2 of our oldest kids are in school at Auburn. And so it was kind of tough to leave Auburn. But, we throughout that whole process, our prayer was just, God, make this crystal clear for us. Where do you want us to go? And, the path put us here in Austin, and, so going on our 3rd season here, and just, couldn't be happier to be a Texas Longhorn.
Dude, you have been at some great programs. Wow.
Yeah, great, and been around great men. Just great coaches, great players, just people. I mean, that's you know, I've got a box in my in my bedroom right now with, I don't know, there's probably 20 plus bowl rings and championship rings and all that stuff in there. And all those rings they're they're important to me because they represent the programs and the people uh, that were involved in that. And not the ring is just a ring. It's not. I mean, it's great. I mean, it's like a little mini trophy and all that stuff, but it's more about the people. And I think back on the relationships that we've been able to build at so many different places and so many different cultures, and just being around great people, and I've been very, very blessed in that regard. So like I said, I'm happy to be here at the University of Texas, and this is a great place to be. I got the best offensive line job in America right now.
Amen, dude. So talking about memories and being through those programs, give me a story to some of your favorite memories in college career.
Well, I think of teams. When I think of memories, I think of teams overall. Like I remember in 1995, we had a great team at Glenville State. We won our conference. I think that was our third or fourth conference championship in a row. Our D line coach was a guy named Dusty Rutledge, and we got our team pictures made that year. And I still have the photo somewhere in one of the boxes, the storage boxes we have. But I still have the photo where we put on the photograph, we put a little plaque that said, 1995 Glenville State College Pioneers, West Virginia Conference champions, and it had our record. I want to say we were 9-3 or somewhere around there. But then in quotation marks, we wrote a fun year. A fun year, because it was we just had a great group of guys. I really loved coaching that team and being around those players every single day. I think about the 2005 West Virginia team. We won the Sugar Bowl that year. I want to say we finished number 5 in the country. We beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl when the Sugar Bowl had to be held in Atlanta because of Hurricane Katrina. So it was almost like a home game for Georgia, but we wound up winning the game 38-35, and just that was a team that you love being around every single day, and just because of the people that were on that team. At the University of Tulsa, we had some great teams at Tulsa. We had number 1 offense in the country in 2007 and 2008. With a bunch of guys that they were like the land of misfit toys a little bit, but they just came together. There was a tremendous amount of synergy with that group, and young men that just believed in each other, believed in our system, believed in the coaching they were getting. They were fun to be around. When I was at Vanderbilt, we went from my first year at Vanderbilt, we were 3-9. And that was when Robbie Caldwell, who is now the O-line coach at Clemson. Robbie was the head coach at Vanderbilt for my first year there. And then our staff got let go. And James Franklin came in and he rehired me. And we went from 3-9 my first year at Vanderbilt. 2 years later, we had back-to-back 9-win seasons. And just watching that transformation with those players, and again, the relationships. We had we called our offensive line there the Band of Brothers, and still really, really close to those guys, and love seeing them when I can, and we stay in communication with each other. And then my 2 years at Penn State were tough years, because Penn State was just coming off of sanctions, from the end of Coach Paterno's time there. And it was just it was a tough deal, but we had great kids, man. Penn State went through all that period of turmoil and never had a losing season, because of the pride that the players put out on the field. And it wasn't always pretty at that time because, we were down a bunch of scholarships, and it was just a tough situation, man. And Coach Franklin's done a great job, obviously, of bringing that program back. But I just think about those kids there, and they're just great young men. And then, at Auburn, my last year at Auburn, we beat Georgia when they were ranked, I think, number one in the country. And then 2 weeks later, turned around and beat Alabama when they were ranked number one in the country. And, I just remember standing on the field at Auburn and during the end of that Alabama game. And, there was a situation, we were on defense, and I took my headset off. It was a third down play. And I was like, man, you just need to soak this one in for a minute. And I took my headset off and just listened to the crowd, and everybody was going crazy. And, we wound up winning the game. And afterwards, they stormed the field. And, to be part of something like that is really neat. And then here at Texas, the building of this program with Coach Herman and, winning the Sugar Bowl 2 years ago, going into New Orleans and beating, again, a really tough Georgia Bulldog team, and I just remember after that game, the confetti falling, and we had talked to our players all season long about that whole feeling, about when you're standing there at the end of a championship. We won the Sugar Bowl championship and the confetti's falling down, and it's an unbelievable feeling. So I got a lot of great memories.
Yes, you do. Wow. What great stories. I talked to Coach Grimes, Jeff Grimes, who you are friends with. We talked a little bit about him, and he talked about a moment when I think he was at Auburn, and it was one of the toughest years he's had, but God taught him so much through that year. Was there one of the times for you in the difficulty at Penn State and everything that you've been through, was there one of those times where God taught you something in the midst of kind of just a troubled and chaotic time?
Yeah, most of the time that I look at adversity, and sometimes our greatest adversities are self-inflicted, what I mean, because of
Oh yeah.
decision making and things of that nature. And, I look at some of the mistakes that I've made throughout my life, and the lessons that, that I've learned from it. And every time that, I like the saying that there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole, and there's sometimes where we dig our own foxholes, and the number one rule when you find yourself in a hole is, the first rule is stop digging, right? And let's work on getting yourself out. And, there's been some times where I've been, on my knees, next to my bed and saying, hey, boy, Lord, I could really use some help on this one. You know what I mean? And some of that stuff's been self-inflicted, and I've learned a lot of lessons about my faith through that. And also learned a lot of lessons about, myself and what's really important, when you're going through life, what really matters. Right.
Yeah.
So,
You know what, too? We can be such knuckleheads sometimes, and it's just God's grace that corrects our path in spite of
no
ourselves.
doubt, no question about that one.
Yeah. So tell me about your family, brother. You are married and you have how many kids?
Yeah. So my wife, Deb, we've been married 25 years. And, I tell my players, it hadn't been 25 years of milk and cookies. It never is. Okay. Marriage is work, man. You got to, it sounds great when when you first get married and you're kind of in the honeymoon stage and all that. And, then you start adding kids into the mix and the dynamics change. And, you've got, here I am trying to be a college football coach. And my wife she worked full time as well as a pharmaceutical sales rep for 17 years. And she really financed my career. She was the one. She raised from a majority of the time early on, right? She made the money in the family, and I was the one who got to chase my dream, so I'm very appreciative of what she did early on in our marriage to allow me to chase my passion, and but we've been married 25 years. We met in grad school. We did our master's together at West Virginia Wesleyan College in Buchanan, West Virginia. That's where we got married at. She's a West Virginia girl. You know, I lived in West Virginia for, I think, 14 years. You know, at one point or another, we've been in and out of the state, but all three of our kids were born in West Virginia. We have three beautiful children. Our oldest son, Trey, is 23. Our daughter, Bailey, is 21. And we have a 17-year-old son, Cade. So Trey and Bailey are currently at Auburn University, finishing up school there. And Cade is a junior in high school here in Austin. And, you know, I'm just really blessed with a great family, and it's really a credit to my wife. You know, she was, like I said, she was the rock, you know, that held us down. And, you know, one thing that was really cool, at our 15th wedding anniversary, okay, we've been married 25 years. So at our 15th wedding anniversary, my wife had just gotten she had won a trip to Hawaii through her company, right, as part of her bonus for her sales bonus structure, whatever. So we go to Hawaii and we renewed our wedding vows on a little beach in Hawaii. And our daughter was the maid of honor, okay, and our sons were the best men. And it was just us. It was just our family. And we had a little pastor there and, you know, a photographer to take some pictures and document everything. But at that point, it was like, it was the right time to do that because we really understood what marriage was about at that point. You know, you've been married 15 years. Okay. You get it now. Right. And, you know, you got your kids there with you. That was really cool. You know, to have them be part of that whole process. And, you know, so that was a special moment for us as a family and certainly for my wife and I, you know, to kind of re-up, if you will, but recommit to each other and to our marriage. And, you know, like I said, it's never all milk and cookies, but certainly, you know, I've been very blessed with a great wife and three great kids.
Dude, I love it. And what that does for your kids, man, just that's the legacy builder, right? That's the thing they're going to remember, be telling their grandkids and stuff. Dude, I absolutely love it. Now, should I get your wife in here to tell me the real story about how you met? Or did she see this stud across the room and said, hey, that guy is so incredibly handsome, I'm going to marry that guy? Or what was the real story?
Yeah, well, I don't know about, well, I'll say this here. I will tell you this. Here's what's funny. Okay. So my daughter, she's getting ready to start looking at colleges. And we were touring around. This is when I was coaching at Penn State. My family was actually still living in Nashville, and we were driving from Nashville up to State College. And we were coming through West Virginia, and we stopped and saw my wife's mom. And then we went to Buchanan, West Virginia, which is where Deb and I met. And I took my daughter to the actual intersection of the sidewalk where I first met my wife. And I'll never forget it because I was walking with the football coaches, and I was a new coach on staff. And she had just gotten hired. I was a graduate assistant with football. She was a graduate assistant with the dean of students. So the dean of students is walking one way and we're coming the other way. And we kind of met on this path. And the head coach, Bill Struble at the time, he's introducing me to the dean of students, and the dean of students is introducing Deb to Coach Struble. And we obviously, you know, everybody's exchanging their pleasantries. And then, you know, Deb said, what are you getting your master's in? And I said, well, I'm going to I have an MBA, and she has an MBA. And so we were doing the same program. And she said, well, maybe I'll see you in class. And I'm looking at her up and down, and I'm going, yeah, I think I will see you in class. You know, that type of deal, right?
Yeah, I'll make sure I see you in class.
Exactly. So she walked away. I gave her the second look. You know what I mean? That's the one that's the meaningful look. The first look you get, so when you get the second look. So yeah, that's how, but I took my daughter right to the spot where we met, and we got our picture taken there, which is really cool. And, you know, so as a matter of fact, I could probably find that picture on my phone and show you right here on the camera. You want to say, you asked me another question, I'll find the picture.
Dude, I love it.
I'm going to show you the picture where we got that done.
So, as you're looking for that picture,
Yeah, go ahead,
uh,
man.
did, as a dad,
Right.
has there been some defining moments for you, memories that you will just like never forget with your kiddos? But beyond, obviously, the getting married on, I mean, renewing your vows on the beach, and well, I guess this one too. Is there another one that's just sticks out that you just kind of go, "Wow, thank you, Lord, that I had that opportunity."
Right. Well, first I'm going to show you this right here.
Dude, I love it.
See that? That was right at the intersection. That's me and my daughter Bailey, right at the intersection where her and where her mom and I met. So yeah, so I'll tell you what was a really cool trip, a really cool experience, I should say. It's beyond a trip. A couple of years ago, through all the recruiting and all that stuff, uh, I did a tally. I saw one of these things on Facebook where it said, "Hey, how many states have you been to? Mark off the states you've been to, whatever." So I'm like, "Hey, I'm going to look at this. I think I've been to a pretty good amount of states." Well, I started counting them, and I figured out I had been to 43 states. Okay, and the fifth, and at the time I was around 46, 47 years old. Okay, so I started this. It was kind of a bucket list deal, and I started this plan, and it was going to be the 50 by 50 tour. Okay, so I had 7 states I had left to get to, and they were all kind of up in the northwestern part of the country. So my 49th summer. So I'm 49 years old, a couple of years ago. It was the summer of 2017, I believe, whatever. Yeah, somewhere right around there, 2017. So my son and I, Trey, our oldest son, we get on a plane and we fly to North Dakota. So that's where we're going to start the trip. And that was one of the states I had not been to. Okay, now I'd been to South Dakota because I'd been there to recruit couple of young men the year prior, or a couple of years prior, but I'd never been in North Dakota. So we started in North Dakota, wound up driving down through South Dakota because we'd never been to the western part of the state, but we went to like the Badlands. We did a helicopter tour of the Badlands. We went and saw Mount Rushmore, the whole deal. Then we stayed in South Dakota one night. Then we drove up through Wyoming. So I'd never been to Wyoming. So it was North Dakota. We went to Wyoming. Okay. We went to Yellowstone and we went to the Grand Tetons and that whole deal and Jackson Hole. Then we went down into Utah. Okay. Hadn't been to Utah. We spent 2 days in Utah, went to a couple of state parks, the Arches and Canyonland State Park. And that was really cool. And then the next day we got up and drove to Idaho. So we stayed one night in Boise, and I called my buddy Brian Harson over at Boise State and went over and got a tour of the blue turf and all that stuff. Then we get up the next day and we drove over to Portland. And so we're in Oregon. Well, and that's where Bailey, our daughter, met us in Oregon. And then we spent the night there, get up, drove to Seattle. So we're in Washington. So that was the 6th state. Spent a day in Seattle, went to Space Needle and Pike's Market and all that stuff. And then the next day we flew to Alaska, and that was my 50th state. And we spent 2 days in Alaska and had an unbelievable trip. And the great part about it, I got to check off all the states and all that stuff. And that's pretty cool, to be able to say you did that. But the best part about it was just, that I think it was 11 days. Okay. Just being with my kids.
Yeah. Coach, and you hear stories, and that's why I think it's so important. I love it because so many fathers in understanding just how important that is to your kids. Because you talk about things your kids will never forget, stories that y'all shared along those journeys. Wow.
Yeah. Well, one of the coolest things was we had the best bacon that we've ever put in our mouths. in this little hole in the wall coffee shop on the side of the road in between Anchorage, Alaska and Seward, Alaska. There was this little place that was called Froth and Forage, and it was in like a double wide trailer. And we stopped in there to get a cup of coffee. And I looked at the menu and it said they had house cured, house smoked, uh, local honey bacon. And I was like, you got to give me an order of that bacon. And so the guy, they make the bacon, they bring it out, and we started eating it. We were like, it was like life-changing bacon, so that was like one of the stories we had from that trip. So,
And I'm sure it's a story you guys probably still talk about to this day, right?
I wish I could get that bacon by mail order. I mean, that guy had it down to a science.
Dude. And I mean, here's the bottom line. If you don't like bacon, I'm not sure I can be friends with a guy who doesn't like bacon. I mean, if you look at me, I've had my share of bacon, right?
I'm going to agree with you 100% on that. It's hard to trust somebody that doesn't like bacon.
Yes, yes, it is.
And that's from my buddy Stan Drayton. I hope he's watching, because Stan's one of them guys. He gives me a hard time about bacon. But and then the next thing I would tell you is that our youngest son, we have a trip planned. Another, we're calling this the Roots Tour, and this is going to start up in northern Maine, and we're going to come down through northern Maine, down through the state of Maine, into New England. We're going to drive down to Southington, Connecticut, where I was born. So where I grew up in northern Maine, where all my family was primarily from. We're going to go down to Southington, Connecticut, where I was born. We're going to drive over to Morgantown, West Virginia, where our youngest son, Cade, was born. Come through Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh and all that area that we used to spend so much time in. We're going to go into Morgantown, where he was born, and then we're going to drive down to Charleston, West Virginia, where my wife was born, and we're calling that the Roots Tour. And that's going to take place probably next summer. We were thinking about doing it this summer, a little bit, crazy this summer. So it'll probably be next summer. But I told him we want to do that before, when he graduates from high school, somewhere right around there, which he graduates next year. Before he goes away to college, I want to take him back to his roots and take him and kind of give him an idea of where I came from, where his mom came from, and certainly where he was born. So that's a trip we have planned in the future.
Brother, I tell you what, I love it in the sense I tell, I try to encourage guys all the time of this. This is something I've learned is sharing stories about how you grew up, how you and your wife met. I mean, all the stuff, because I think all of our kids have this innate curiosity to know more about our dad. What was his favorite ice cream growing up? What was his favorite candy? Who were his buddies? What did his friends think about him? All that kind of stuff, dude. That's the kind of stuff that our kids just crave. And so being able to share those times with your kids, bro, it doesn't get much better than that. That's
priceless.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So as we wrap up, I got a couple of last kind of questions for you.
All right.
What's been your biggest struggle as a dad, and how have you overcome
it? Probably, and I think I know you talk to a lot of coaches, in our profession, is the biggest struggle is time. You know what I mean? And so I think every coach, if they really got down to the nuts and bolts of it, we all carry a little bit of guilt because you feel like you've spent so much time raising other people's kids, and pouring into them and from a coaching perspective, and you just kind of hope that you didn't screw it up with your own kids. You know what I mean? Sure. And because there's a lot of people ask me about, balance. How do you have balance in your life, as a coach? And there's some guys that'll say, here's how I get balance. Here's how I create balance. But if we're all being honest, we don't have balance. We don't, and coaching, to me, being called a coach is, it's not a job. It's not I don't work for a living, man. I'm called to do this. I'm blessed to do this. So I know some people will say, that we're not human doings, we're human beings, right? And what you do is not who you are, right? but I would beg to differ when it comes to coaches. I think you can say the same thing about teachers. I think you can say the same thing about pastors. My wife worked. She had a great job, but she didn't define herself as a pharmaceutical sales rep. Okay. I think when you're and then there's other people that have like manual labor work, right? I mean, they're like carpenters and construction workers, and those guys are. I mean, the men and women that do that, they're working, okay, but they don't define themselves as that. I think when you're called to something, it defines who you are. So I believe that if you want to call me a human doing because I coach football instead of a human being, then fine, so be it. I'm a human doing, man. I like what I do. It defines who I am. As much as father, as much as husband, coach does as well, and that's probably been the toughest thing, is just that, and that you look at it and you go, oh man, I got these unbelievable relationships with my players, right? Which I do. And I know I got great relationships with my children too, even though I probably haven't been that I'm not the easiest guy to be around at times. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I got just like, and my players will tell you the same thing,
Yeah.
I mean, I got issues. I got some issues, but my kids know I love them. I tell them all the time. And I don't just tell them, what I mean? It's like, that's ingrained in them, just like it is with I listened to your interview with Jeff, and one thing that he said was about with Coach Grimes. And he said, about how you can coach them as hard as you love them. Right. And that's how I've always approached coaching. And that's how I approach being a dad as well, is that I'm very demanding of my children. I have high expectations for them. I want to hold them to standards, and but I'd jump in front of a car for them. I'd take a bullet for them. I would, lay down my life for them. So,
yeah, you know what, Coach? I think every man and just your honesty there it's so important for every guy to understand too. Man, we all have those times. I mean, I'm in the fatherhood business, if you will, and I still struggle with guilt and time balancing and am I doing enough? And so I think that's just a constant battle. But being aware of that and being able to walk in that awareness and know, on a daily basis, okay, I need to lean a little more here or whatever. I also tell you, my wife keeps me in check there also.
yeah,
When I'm in
right,
the
yeah.
office too much or doing whatever, she's like, honey, you need to focus.
Right, right.
So, dude, I love it. What is the last question? What's the best thing about being a dad, brother?
Oh man. There's so much that's great about it, but it's, I guess it's almost like the whole thing of, I don't want to say hindsight being 2020, but as you watch your kids grow up, you know what I mean? And you see the processes that they've gone through, the challenges that they've had, the struggles that they've had to overcome, you know, the triumphs that they've had, right? The successes. We don't want our kids to fail, right? None of us do as parents, right? But sometimes you learn valuable lessons from failure. And I think one of the dangers is, as a parent right now, is if you try to keep them from failing too much, where you don't allow them to learn from failure, that's a real issue, right? But to see them triumph over that, and then ultimately to just, watch them grow into the people that they become, and feeling like, okay, I've got a legacy with my kids. They're my legacy to the world, right? And more, I tell my players all the time that, I love my players, All right. And I'd do anything for them, but there's three kids on the planet that I love more than my players. And it's Trey, Bailey, and Cade. So,
Amen. Amen, bro. Coach, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking this time, dude, and just having this honest conversation. I think it's going to impact so many guys, and so many guys are going to identify with what a lot of what you said. So, dude, you're a stud and the real deal, and I appreciate your time.
man, I appreciate it too. And I just want to leave you with one thought, and that's this: is that don't be afraid to make a mistake. We all make mistakes. We do. I have made more mistakes than I would want to count. I would hate to be judged by my poorest day. I mean, I can think about some mistakes that I've made, some poor decisions that I've made, and I'd hate to be judged by that alone, right? The biggest thing is that if you make a mistake with your kids, right, it's okay to say you're sorry. It's okay to say I was wrong. You know what I mean? I know right now my kids are going, holy cow, I can't believe he just said that, right? Because they're probably going, he's never said that to me. But I've said it to them more than they can probably remember, okay? That, if I've lost my temper with my kids, which I have, I've never struck them or anything, but I've raised my voice at times. And there's been times where, they would say, well, you're yelling at me. I'm like, I ain't yelling. And then you'll know when I'm yelling, you know what I mean? So my voice is going to change, but if you make a mistake, right, man, just be honest about it and say, look, I screwed that up. I'm sorry. I apologize. I love you more than anything. And I screwed up, and, I'll make it up to you. But, I think the honesty part of that and showing that you're accountable, that's an important lesson for kids to see. You know what I mean?
Coach, I think you're living my life too. I don't know what. There's so many times where I messed up. And here's what I think too, and so many men need to hear this message, and you're right on with it. Don't be afraid to fail, man. And there's
Right.
going to be times that we fail, and I have apologized to my kids and asked for forgiveness more than I want to admit. And I still there'll be times that I'm going to mess up. I'm going to lose it. I'm going to do something wrong as a dad. But I think in that they see that, man, I love them. I'm having the conversation with them, and they see a couple of things. They don't have to be perfect because they know you're not, right,
Right.
as a dad. And they understand and know that when they mess up, they can come to you. Say, you know what, Dad, I
Absolutely.
messed up. Dude, I love it, man. I love it. We're going to have to reconnect at some point, dude, because I could talk to you. I know we're like going on an hour now. I could talk to you for a couple more hours, but we'll cut this thing short. Thanks again for doing this, Coach.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me, man. And you're doing a great thing. I've had a lot of my buddies that have connected with with your Facebook page and with your, just the website you've created, the message you're trying to get out is an awesome message, man. So keep doing what you're doing, dude. It's awesome.
Brother, you are very kind, and it's all God, because I can mess this thing up in a hurry, but I appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, man. Thank
Thanks,
you.
brother. See you soon.
All right.
Be sure to check out the Father Effect movie, which is free here on YouTube, at a link in the description below. And remember, your life is your legacy, and what you do and say every day is impacting your family and generations to come. See you next time on the Father Effect Show.